Within the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, a tale of power, betrayal, and fraternal strife was written in the annals of history. The United Arab Emirates, a nation renowned today for its glittering skylines and the immense wealth that flows from its vast oil reserves, was once a collection of modest sheikdoms, humble in their means, yet rich in culture and tradition. It was a land where the desert met the sea, where ancient traditions coexisted with the relentless march of modernity, and where the lines between family loyalty and political ambition were at times blurred. As the UAE surged forward, fueled by the black gold beneath its sands, the city of Sharjah stood as a beacon of cultural heritage amidst the rapidly changing landscape. But beneath the surface of this emirate, where tradition and progress intertwined, a storm was brewing. It was a year that would mark the first coup in the Persian Gulf since the seismic tremors of the 1973 oil crisis. A coup that would pit brother against brother, Sheikh against Sultan, in the very palace where they had once played as children. But what drove these brothers to such a catastrophic conflict? Was it a simple quest for power, or were there deeper, darker forces at play? As the sands of Sharjah shifted under the weight of their ambitions, the world was about to witness a saga of betrayal and survival. This is the true story of the 1987 Sharjah coup, a story of how dissatisfaction and ambition can corrupt even the closest of bonds and drive a man to turn against his own blood, and of how a single act of treachery can threaten the very existence of a nation. Welcome to the Coup Archives, where I aim to explore the coup d'etats and armed conflicts that have shaped history and influenced our world today. Before we start, please subscribe and smash the like button if you enjoy educational content like this. With that being said, let the video commence. Between the shimmering waters of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman lies the Emirate of Sharjah, a place where the sands of time have recorded tales of ancient wealth, colonial ambitions, and the indomitable spirit of its people. Sharjah, the third largest emirate in the United Arab Emirates, covers 2,590 square kilometers, making up 3.3% of the UAE's total area, excluding its islands. With a population today that exceeds 1.8 million residents, it is a vibrant and diverse emirate, home to a rich tapestry of culture and history. Sharjah is not just a city, it is a collection of towns and exclaves, each with its own unique identity and story. From the capital city of Sharjah, which gives the emirate its name, to the minor towns of Kalba, Al-Daid, Dibba al-Hisn, and Khor Fakkan, this emirate is a mosaic of landscapes and communities. Geographically, Sharjah is significant for its land on both the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, a feature that has shaped its history and its role in regional and global affairs. The city of Sharjah itself is a mere 170 kilometers from the UAE capital Abu Dhabi and just 30 kilometers from the bustling metropolis of Dubai. Yet, despite its proximity to these major cities, Sharjah has always maintained its own distinct character. The city overlooks a 16-kilometer stretch of Arabian Gulf coastline, where sandy beaches meet the built-up areas of the city. The central region of Sharjah is a blend of lush green oases, gravel plains, and rolling red sand dunes, offering a stark contrast to the rocky coastline and towering mountains that define its eastern boundaries along the Gulf of Oman. Sharjah's history is as rich as its landscapes, as it was historically one of the wealthiest towns in this region, with settlements dating back over 5,000 years. This ancient history is intertwined with the story of the Al-Qasimi clan, a powerful seafaring tribe that claims to be descended from the Islamic prophet Muhammad. The clan took control of Sharjah around 1727, declaring the Emirate independent. For centuries, the Al-Qasimi dynasty ruled these lands, navigating the turbulent waters of regional politics and colonial ambitions. The wealth and strategic importance of Sharjah did not go unnoticed by the European powers of the time. From the 16th to the 19th centuries, Portugal, Holland, and Britain all sought to control Sharjah as they vied for dominance over the trade routes between the Mediterranean Sea and India. References to Sharjah can be found on the 1666 Dutch map, which accurately depicted the locations of Sharjah's towns such as Kalba, Korfaken, and Dibba. The turning point in Sharjah's modern history came on January 8, 1820, when Sheikh Sultan I signed the General Maritime Treaty with Britain. This treaty established Sharjah as a British protectorate, a status intended to keep the encroaching Ottoman Turks at bay. Like its neighbors Ajman, Dubai, Ras Al Khaimah, and Al Quwain, Sharjah's strategic location on the route to India made it a critical player in the regional geopolitics of the time, earning it recognition as a salute state. The economy of Sharjah has always been diverse, with fishing and pearling playing crucial roles in its early development. For centuries, the pearling industry was a cornerstone of Sharjah's economy, with the Emirates' waters yielding some of the most sought-after pearls in the world. However, the rise of Japanese-cultured pearls in the 1940s dealt a severe blow to this industry, leading to its decline. Yet, Sharjah adapted, shifting its focus to other forms of trade and industry, ensuring its continued prosperity. The story of Sharjah took a dramatic turn on December 2, 1971, when it joined its neighbors Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Ajman, Al Quwain, and Fujairah in the Act of Union, forming the United Arab Emirates. This moment of unification was a milestone in the history of the region, a bold step towards a new future. But as with many great moments in history, it was not without its share of turmoil. The unification of the UAE was marred with bloodshed in Sharjah. The ruler at the time, Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi, who had authorized Sharjah's entry into the UAE, became the victim of a coup. On January 24, 1972, the former ruler Sheikh Sakr bin Sultan Al-Qasimi staged a leftist coup, seizing power from Khalid. Sakr, who had been deposed by Khalid in 1965, harbored deep resentment and sought to reclaim his throne. In a bid to erase Sakr's legacy, Khalid had ordered the demolition of Sharjah Fort Al-Hisn Sharjah, but this act of defiance only fueled Sakr's determination. During the coup, Sakr took over Khalid's palace, holding him captive. In the chaos that ensued, Sheikh Khalid was tragically killed. Sakr was arrested shortly thereafter, but the damage was done. The coup not only shook Sharjah, but also sent ripples throughout the newly formed UAE. In the wake of this turmoil, Khalid's brother, Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi, an esteemed author and historian, ascended to power on January 25, 1972. In the same year that Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi came to power, oil was discovered in Mubarak oil field, located 80 kilometers offshore and near the Abu Musa island. The production of oil began 2 years later, in 1974, ushering in a new era of economic growth and development for Sharjah. This discovery of oil was a turning point, providing the emirate with the resources needed to invest in infrastructure, education, and culture, transforming Sharjah into the vibrant and dynamic emirate we know today. Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi, born on Sunday, July 2nd, 1939, in Sharjah, was raised with a profound love for his homeland, which only deepened as he pursued a broad and varied education. From a young age, he developed a keen interest in the history of his country and the Holy Quran. At the age of 9, he began his formal education. By 1954, he took a significant step in his education by enrolling in an English private school to learn the language. His academic journey continued as he completed his elementary and secondary education in both Sharjah and Kuwait. In 1965, Sheikh Sultan furthered his education by traveling to Cairo, where he enrolled in the College of Agriculture at Cairo University to complete his higher education. During a 2-year period from February 1961 to September 1963, he also contributed to the education of others by teaching English and mathematics at Sharjah Industrial School. Upon his return to Sharjah in 1965, he took on the role of chairman of the municipality, and after graduating in 1971, he was appointed to manage the ruler's office in Sharjah. With the formation of the United Arab Emirates on December 2, 1971, Sheikh Sultan took on a significant national role as the UAE's Minister of Education. His path to leadership took a dramatic turn on January 25, 1972, when he became the ruler of Sharjah, following the assassination of the previous ruler, Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi. During an attempted coup by loyalists of Sheikh Sakr bin Sultan Al-Qasimi, at the age of 32, Sheikh Sultan not only became the ruler of Sharjah, but also a member of the UAE Supreme Council, continuing the lineage of Al-Qasimi rulers that date back to 1600 AD. Regarded as one of the most progressive and educated leaders in the Gulf, Sheikh Sultan was known for his forward-thinking proposals, including the idea of a partially elected parliament for Sharjah, an unprecedented move in the region, except for Kuwait. He was also working on establishing a system of neighboring advisory councils when the coup took place. Despite his vision, his leadership faced challenges due to his alleged, lofty, and sometimes autocratic style, as well as lax financial management. His frequent absences, often to pursue historical research, further complicated matters. As a PhD graduate from England's Exeter University, he was deeply engrossed in researching the history of the Portuguese colonial era in the Gulf. Abdul Al-Aziz would point out, when financial troubles hit, when the money dried up, the Sultan took off in another direction to higher studies, leaving the emirate to sink into debts until they reached and surpassed the $1 billion mark. In contrast, details about his elder brother, Sheikh Abdul Al-Aziz bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi's early life and personal background are scarce, with little information available in online sources or textbooks outside of his involvement in the attempted coup against his brother. However, I was able to uncover that he was born in 1937 and served as the head of the Emir's office and the commander of the Emirates Guard during the reign of his younger brother, who was the Sultan at the time. When their eldest brother, Sheikh Khalid, was assassinated in 1972, Abdul Al-Aziz was passed over for the succession, a decision that perhaps fueled his later actions. Despite this setback, he became one of the wealthiest businessmen in Sharjah, holding the influential position of President of the Emirates Chamber of Commerce. His bold attempt to seize power as Sultan reflected not only his frustrations, but also the frustrations of recession-hit merchants and disillusioned sheiks within Sharjah, who were similarly dissatisfied with the economic conditions and governance of the time. In the mid-1980s, the Emirate of Sharjah, with its population hovering between 200,000 and 220,000 residents, found itself teetering on the edge of an economic precipice. The foundation of its economy, heavily reliant on the extraction and refinement of petroleum and natural gas, began to crumble as the global oil market plunged into disarray. This year, 1986, marked the beginning of a devastating period for OPEC countries as oil prices plummeted, dragging Sharjah's fragile economy down with them. Sharjah, unlike its wealthier neighbors Abu Dhabi and Dubai, was uniquely vulnerable to these market shifts. While those emirates had diversified their economic portfolios and could adjust oil production levels to compensate for falling prices, Sharjah's economy was far more precarious. Revenue in Sharjah at the time mostly came from condensate and gas sales from the onshore Sharjah field, crude oil sales from the offshore Mubarak field, and newly commissioned LPG plant fed by Sharjah gas. But as oil prices nosedived, the once reliable income streams began to dry up, leaving the emirate in a dire financial state. The numbers painted a grim picture. In 1985, Sharjah's oil and gas income had been a robust $450 million, but by 1986, this figure had nearly halved to $220 million, a catastrophic decline for an economy that was already grappling with substantial debt. The Emirates' financial obligations were crushing, with scheduled debt repayments totaling about $150 million each year, far outstripping the revenue generated. This economic downturn sent shockwaves through the Emirate as the government defaulted on virtually all debt owed to local contractors and banks, a sum totaling some $800 million according to bankers. The weight of these obligations were suffocating, with Sultan's advisors putting the international debt at $340 million and local debt at $540 million. The roots of Sharjah's financial woes ran deep, exacerbated by a series of questionable economic policies that alienated both local businesses and foreign investors. A pivotal moment came in October 1985 when the government, in a bid to assert greater control over public morality, prohibited the sale of alcohol in public places. This move, while perhaps intended to strengthen the Emirates' cultural identity, had far-reaching economic consequences. The ban dealt a severe blow to the blossoming tourist trade, compelling restaurants and hotel businesses to relocate to neighboring Dubai, where the rules were more relaxed. The loss of this burgeoning sector further strained Sharjah's already belligerent economy. But it was not just the loss of tourism revenue that fueled discontent within the emirate. The economic policies of Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi's government, particularly its ambitious development plans, were increasingly seen as unrealistic and out of touch with the Emirates' financial realities. These plans, though grand in vision, were way out of proportion to Sharjah's meager oil and gas revenue. The government's attempt to fulfill these development goals led to chronic cash flow problems, creating a vicious cycle of borrowing and debt accumulation. As oil prices continued to fall in 1986, Sharjah's financial situation became untenable. The Emirates' inability to increase oil production levels meant that it could not compensate for the lower prices, unlike its more resource-rich neighbors. The result was a growing sense of unease and frustration among Sharjah's residents and business community. According to Sheikh Abdul Aziz, Sharjah's economy had become weakened with around $1.3 billion in debt. The emirate, once a beacon of stability in the region, was now drowning in a sea of red ink. This economic turmoil did more than just strain the emirate's finances, it also eroded the confidence of the people in their leadership. The sharp decline in oil revenues, coupled with mounting debt and failing economic policies, created a perfect storm that threatened to engulf the entire emirate. The very foundation of Sharjah's economy, built on the promise of oil wealth, was now cracking under the weight of unfulfilled expectations and mismanagement. In the early morning hours of June 17, 1987, the city of Sharjah awoke to a scene that few could have imagined. A coup was underway. As the first light of dawn spread across the desert, the population of Sharjah found their city transformed into a fortress. Forces loyal to Sheikh Abdul Al-Aziz bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi had seized the Emir's court, and by the time the sun rose, they had entrenched themselves in the heart of the city. Soldiers stood in trenches surrounding the court. Jeep-mounted guns guarded key positions, helicopters circled ominously overhead, and snipers took their places on rooftops. The Emirate of Sharjah, once a beacon of stability, had become the stage for a dramatic and dangerous power struggle. Abdul al-Aziz's forces moved with calculated precision. The local police, loyal to his cause, kept protesters and supporters of Sultan bin Mohammed al-Qasimi at bay, ensuring that the takeover proceeded without immediate resistance. Troops were strategically positioned at key intersections throughout the city, and artillery pieces were ominously placed near government buildings. Despite the military presence, the plotters allowed the daily lives of Sharjah citizens to continue with little disruption. The city remained calm, even peaceful, as journalists noted. The free movement of people and materials was permitted. Yet, beneath this veneer of normalcy, the tension was palpable. However, not all was untouched. Sharjah International Airport was closed, and Dar al-Khalij, the Emirates' largest newspaper, was shut down by the plotters. Journalists fled to Dubai, leaving a void in the flow of information. As the coup unfolded, Abdul al-Aziz made a bold statement through the official Emirates news agency, WAM, claiming that his brother Sultan had resigned as Sheikh at the request of their family after admitting to gross financial mismanagement. It was a strategic move aimed at presenting the coup as a legitimate transition of power rather than an outright seizure. But this narrative quickly began to unravel. Sultan's wife, who was in Dubai at the time, immediately denied the claim to Emirate officials. Sultan himself was soon rushed to Dubai, where he publicly condemned the coup, exposing the falsehood of his brother's assertions. Abdul al-Aziz, however, did not waver. He launched a scathing critique of his brother's rule, accusing Sultan's advisors of squandering state money on lavish vacations to Europe and America, and even gambling abroad. He painted himself as the champion of the common people, declaring that under his leadership he would fight for the widows, workers who went without salaries, and debt collectors who were thrown in jail. It was a message aimed at resonating with those who had felt neglected under Sultan's administration. For 4 tense days, Abdul al-Aziz held out at the dawn, surrounded by hundreds of Emiri Guard mercenaries. His resolve was unshakable. "I entered with a white dish dasher and will leave with a red one if I have to," he defiantly told the visitor, expressing his willingness to die for his cause. In an attempt to legitimize his rule, Abdul al-Aziz decreed the establishment of an appointed parliament or consultative council and a formal cabinet similar to those in Abu Dhabi but lacking elsewhere in the UAE. He promised democracy and transparency, vowing to lead Sharjah out of its crisis. In a dramatic gesture, he had a message dropped by helicopter over the city on June 19, telling the residents of Sharjah, "How I have cried when I see the state of many of you." Yet, despite his promises of reform and democracy, while appealing to some, did not align with the values of many in Sharjah. Abdul al-Aziz did find support among the Emirates business elite, who were disillusioned with Sultan's handling of the economy. They appreciated Abdul al-Aziz's secular, pro-tourist economic outlook and believed that he could revive Sharjah's fortunes. However, this backing was not enough to secure widespread support. Throughout the coup, it became increasingly clear that Abdul al-Aziz had failed to win over the entire Sharjah Emiri Guard, the Emirates' standing army. Out of the approximately 2,400 members, only a third, around 800 soldiers, sided with Abdul al-Aziz. Another 800 remained loyal to Sultan. While the remaining 800 were loyal to the Emirate federal government, this division within the military mirrored the broader fragmentation of support within the Emirate. Initially, it seemed that the leaders of the United Arab Emirates might be willing to accept Abdul al-Aziz as the new ruler of Sharjah. Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, Sheikh of Abu Dhabi and then president of the UAE, appeared to support the coup, viewing it as a way to reduce Dubai's political influence and mitigate Abu Dhabi's financial burdens. He was also frustrated that he had to cover nearly the entire €200 million loan to Sharjah, guaranteed by Abu Dhabi in 1978, with the last $9 million installment paid just a month before the coup. Moreover, Sheikh Zayed may have sought to disrupt the growing alliance between Sharjah and Dubai, an alliance that threatened to diminish Abu Dhabi's dominance within the federation. However, as days passed, it became evident that Abdul al-Aziz was increasingly isolated, both internationally and domestically. The initial support from Abu Dhabi began to wane as the reality of the situation set in. Sheikh Zayed, realizing that Abdul al-Aziz could not secure the necessary support to maintain his position, quietly withdrew his backing. The coup, which had begun with such promise for Abdul al-Aziz, was now teetering on the brink of failure. It became increasingly clear that the ambitious coup led by Abdul al-Aziz bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi was crumbling under the weight of political reality. What had begun as a bold bid for power, fortified by promises of reform and fueled by the frustrations of the Emirates business elite, was now facing ununanimous opposition from the United Arab Emirates leadership. The writing was on the wall. The UAE's rulers were poised to reinstate Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi, the legitimate ruler of Sharjah, and to quell the rebellion that threatened to tear the federation apart. Faced with the growing resistance, Abdul al-Aziz shifted his strategy. No longer was he calling for the outright deposition of his brother. Instead, he proposed a joint rule, a shared leadership that would include a directly elected democratic parliament in Sharjah, an unprecedented move in the conservative political landscape of the UAE. He also demanded personal control over Sharjah's oil and financial departments, seeking to leverage the Emirates' resources as a bargaining chip in the negotiations. This pivot in his message was a clear attempt to salvage his position, to find a way to maintain influence even as the tide turned against him. As the days passed, the eyes of the world turned towards Sharjah. Western media, sensing the potential for greater conflict, began to speculate on the implications of the coup. On June 20, the Washington Post suggested that the situation could escalate into an inter-emirate war between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, a scenario that the UAE blandly denied. The specter of such a conflict loomed large, threatening to unravel the delicate fabric of the UAE Federation. The possibility of a broader regional conflict was further heightened by the fears that the coup might have been orchestrated by the Soviet Union. Abdul Al-Aziz's pro-worker rhetoric, combined with his forces' use of Soviet surplus equipment, including Kalashnikov AK-47 assault rifles, fed these suspicions, casting a shadow over his intentions. Central to the resolution of the crisis was Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, then the UAE's Minister of Defense. His role in the negotiations was pivotal. It was Mohammed who persuaded Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the ruler of Abu Dhabi and president of the UAE, to abandon his initial support for Abdul Al-Aziz. Mohammed bin Rashid's diplomatic acumen and strategic foresight was instrumental in drafting the proposed settlement, a delicate compromise that aimed to defuse the situation without further bloodshed. At the same time, the UAE faced pressure from Saudi Arabia to resolve the dispute diplomatically before the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries General Assembly in Vienna that year, adding an extra layer of urgency to the proceedings. On June 21st, the Federal Supreme Council sanctioned a deal that would bring the crisis to a close. Under the terms of the agreement, Abdul Al-Aziz and his forces would surrender their arms and peacefully vacate the Emir's court. In return, Abdul Al-Aziz would renounce his claims to the Sharjah throne and be named Crown Prince, or Deputy Emir, a title that would be inherited by his son. The deal also included a blanket amnesty for all participants in the coup, a move designed to prevent further unrest and to maintain the fragile army of the UAE. The alternative, a prolonged standoff, would have likely strained the Federation to its breaking point, potentially pitting Abu Dhabi and Dubai against each other and opening the door to foreign intervention. On June 24th, Abdul Al-Aziz accepted the deal with a heavy heart. He walked out of the Emir's court, flanked by his son and his military leaders. The once defiant leader who had boldly declared his willingness to die for his cause now found himself stepping aside in the interests of peace. The coup had failed, but the consequences of these events would reverberate through Sharjah and the UAE for years to come. Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi, the reinstated ruler, was deeply disturbed by the precedent set by the Federal Supreme Council's amnesty deal. He feared that it would encourage further attempts at rebellion, potentially leading to a Central American situation in the Gulf, where coups and foreign intervention became common occurrences. In response, Sultan took decisive action to secure his rule. He purged his own guard, placing them with Dubai Emiri guards for his personal protection, a clear signal of his mistrust in the loyalty of his own forces. For several months after the coup, Sultan chose to live in Dubai, claiming that it was necessary for his safety and that of his family. The political landscape of Sharjah had irrevocably altered, and the Sultan's actions reflected his recognition of this new reality. The power struggle between the two brothers, however, did not end with Abdul Al-Aziz's resignation. An uneasy truce settled over the emirate, with both men continuing to wield influence in Sharjah's political sphere. This delicate balance of power would persist until January 23, 2005, when Abdul Al-Aziz bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi died of natural causes. By then, the dispute had largely lost its intensity. In the years that followed, the coup of 1987 faded into the background, overshadowed by the dramatic events of the Gulf War just 3 years later. Yet, the legacy of the coup remained a testament of the complex dynamics of power in the UAE. At its core, the coup was a cry for more rational economic management and a demand for greater input by the people in the decisions that shaped their lives. It was a brief but intense flare of defiance, fueled by the mounting pressure of financial crisis that threatened to unravel the Emirates' stability. As Arab diplomatic sources in Abu Dhabi revealed to UPI News, the coup was not merely a personal power struggle, but a reaction to the deepening economic rift between Sharjah and the oil companies and bankers that held its fate in their hands. The story of Abdul Al-Aziz's revolt is not just one of brotherly conflict, it is a story of a region in transition, of a society grappling with the demands of modernity, and of leaders walking the tightrope between tradition and the need for progress. In the end, the coup of 1987 stands as a testament to the delicate dance of power in the Gulf, a dance where every step must be carefully measured, every move scrutinized, and every misstep potentially catastrophic. It is a reminder that in a world as complex and interconnected as ours, the stability of a nation, and indeed a region, often hangs by the thinnest of threads.